Hi, and welcome to Drive, your source for automotive reviews, analysis, maintenance, and restorations. Please subscribe to our expanding channel. Please watch the entire video, and of course, please click on notifications. Also, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and please recommend us to your friends. Hi, I'm Chris Capredoni, and I'm very pleased today to be discussing one of my all-time favorite car brands, McLaren Automotive. They design and manufacture some of the most beautiful supercars on the planet, and it all started with one man, the namesake, Bruce McLaren. Bruce Leslie McLaren entered his first race in 1952 as a 15-year-old schoolboy. He won his first Grand Prix just 7 years later at the age of 22. He then formed a racing team that remains the only one to have achieved motorsport's Triple Crown, winning the F1 title, Indianapolis 500, and Le Mans. Bruce McLaren worked his way up through club races in and around Auckland, New Zealand, where he was born. His skill took him to the pinnacle of motorsport, Formula One. He won his first Grand Prix at just 22, the youngest ever winner at the time. But driving alone wasn't enough. Bruce had the mind of an engineer. He formed a racing team in 1963 to build his own race cars. He called it Bruce McLaren Racing. Bruce had been a driver for the British Formula One team Cooper, with whom he had won 3 Grand Prix and came second in the 1960 World Championship. Wanting to compete in the Australasian Tasman Series, Bruce approached his employers, but when team owner Charles Cooper insisted on using 1.5-liter Formula One specification engines instead of the 2.5-liter motors permitted by the Tasman rules, Bruce decided to set up his own team and run him and his prospective Formula One teammate, Timmy Mayer, with custom-built Cooper cars. Bruce won the 1964 series, but Mayer was killed in practice for the final race at the Langford Circuit in Tasmania. When Bruce McLaren approached Teddy Mayer, racing entrepreneur and brother of Timmy Mayer, to help him with the purchase of the Xerox Special Sports Car from Roger Penske, Teddy Mayer and Bruce McLaren began discussing a business partnership, resulting in Teddy Mayer buying into the Bruce McLaren Motor Racing Limited, eventually becoming its largest shareholder. The team was based in Feltham in 1963-64 and from 1965 until 1981 in Colnbrook, England. Bruce used color schemes that were not based on traditional themes. Their first car, the McLaren M2B, was painted white with a green stripe to represent a fictional Yamaura team in John Frankenheimer's film Grand Prix, starring James Gardner. During this period, Bruce drove for his team in the United Kingdom and North America, and also entered the 1965 Tasman Series with Phil Hill, but did not win it. He continued to drive in Grand Prix for Cooper, but judging the team's form to be waning, decided to race his own cars in 1966. A decade and a half after Bruce McLaren's death in 1970, at the young age of 33, McLaren Cars was founded on December 2, 1985. In 2010, McLaren Cars was replaced by McLaren Automotive, which is in existence today. McLaren's founder was Ron Dennis. He is no longer part of the organization. He had a falling out with the board of directors and left due to a takeover bid gone bad in 2016. McLaren's headquarters is located at the McLaren Technology Centre in Woking, UK. McLaren's current CEO is Michael Letters, and McLaren's current design director is Robert Melville. Frank Stephenson has had involvement in earlier McLaren designs. As of 2022, output from McLaren Automotive has been estimated to be 4,662 units and therefore is considered a niche manufacturer. There are 2 divisions at McLaren Automotive, McLaren GT and McLaren Special Operations, also known as MSO. Both divisions are responsible for modifying models and creating variants for street and track use. All of these variants are very limited production runs ranging from 1 to 50 units. These variants all have high potential for accelerated appreciation over the coming years and decades. The parent company for McLaren Automotive, McLaren GT, and McLaren Special Operations is McLaren Group. The first consumer road vehicle that McLaren produced was the iconic McLaren F1. Today, F1s are valued upwards of $20 million each. When introduced, it was the fastest production car for almost a decade, at 240 miles an hour or 336 kilometers per hour. The F1 concept was developed by Gordon Murray. He is a South African-British designer of Formula One race cars. He currently heads up Gordon Murray Automotive, having developed the T33 and the T50. In total, only 106 McLaren F1s were manufactured. 5 were prototypes labeled XP1, XP2, XP3, XP4, and XP5, 64 road versions, 1 tuned developmental prototype called the XP1 LM, 5 tuned versions referred to as LM, 1 long-tail development prototype labeled XP GT, 2 long-tail versions labeled as GTs, and 28 race cars labeled as GTRs. Production began in 1989 and ended in 1998. At the time of production, each car took around 3.5 months to manufacture. McLaren went into hiatus and did not produce any other road vehicles until 2010 when McLaren Automotive was formed. In 2010, when McLaren Automotive was formed, their first vehicle was the MP4-12C, or 12C as it was marketed. It started development in 2007, was unveiled in 2009, and finally launched in 2010. This model was the first production vehicle produced since the legendary McLaren F1. It was completely built in-house by McLaren Automotive, including the twin-turbo V8, no longer utilizing BMW V12s. Designer of the 12C was Frank Stephenson. One new innovation was the chassis, a one-piece carbon fiber tub called the carbon monocell, weighing only 80 kilograms or 176 pounds. McLaren designed the 12C to be a traditional two-seater, unlike the F1, which was an unconventional three-seater. The 650S, launched in 2014, was the replacement for the 12C. It shares the carbon fiber reinforced chassis and the 3.8-liter twin-turbocharged McLaren ME38T V8 engine with the 12C. Horsepower is now 641 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. The 560 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox is built by Graziano Trasmissioni. There have been many variants of the 650S developed by both McLaren GT and McLaren Special Operations. All are listed here, and many of them have production runs limited to only 50 units. The 570S was introduced in 2015. Designed to be a daily driver sports car with increased luggage and storage space while retaining the supercar feel and performance of a McLaren. The model was exclusively designed by Robert Melville. The 3.8-liter twin-turbocharged V8 is tuned down to 562 horsepower and arranged in a mid-engine layout. The same 7-speed dual-clutch transmission developed by Graziano Trasmissioni used in the 650S is mated to the twin-turbo V8. As with every McLaren model, several variants have been developed and produced in very limited quantities. The 720S replaces the 650S. It was designed by Frank Stephenson and Robert Melville and introduced in 2017. It has been built on an improved carbon fiber monocoque, which is even lighter and stiffer than the one used in the 650S. The engine, known as the M840T, is a 4-liter twin-turbocharged V8 producing 710 horsepower at 7,500 RPM. Maximum torque is 568 pound-foot. Several variants, especially from McLaren Special Operations, have been developed and produced in very limited quantities. In 2019, McLaren introduced the GT, their first dedicated GT car based on the same platform as the 720S. It had more storage capacity and the most compliant double wishbone suspension of any McLaren before it. Its twin-turbo V8 produced 612 horsepower at 7,000 RPM and maximum torque of 453 pound-feet. It did not take long for McLaren to sell out of the 375-unit limited production for the McLaren P1 when introduced in 2013. By December 2015, they were sold out. This extremely capable McLaren is considered the rightful successor to the legendary F1, combining hybrid power and Formula One technology. The P1 uses a carbon fiber monocoque and a safety cage system called monocage. The P1's hydrocarbon combustion unit is a 3.8-liter twin-turbocharged V8 delivering 727 horsepower and 531 pound-feet of torque. Combined with its electric motor, it produces 903 horsepower and an enormous 664 pound-feet of torque. P1 variants are as follows: P1 GTR, P1 MSO, P1 LM, P1 GTR 18, P1 Spider, P1 GT, and P1 GTR by MSO. The Artura, introduced in 2021, is the second McLaren hybrid and the first McLaren with a V6 engine. The Artura, when paired with its electric motor, produces a combined output of 671 horsepower at 7,500 RPM and 531 pound-feet of torque. It is mated with an 8-speed dual-clutch transmission and all power going to the rear wheels. Artura's V6 engine exhibits innovation with a bank angle of 120 degrees, a first for a production V6. This was to allow for two turbos to sit in between the cylinder banks for space efficiency. Unfortunately, this is the worst place for heat. The Elva, introduced in 2019, is part of the McLaren Ultimate Series classification, joining the F1, P1, Senna, and Speedtail. It is an extreme, open-top concept, many without a windscreen, that were inspired by the race cars developed by Bruce McLaren in the 1960s, like the M1A, M1B, and M1C. The name Elva comes from Elva, which means she goes in French. In 2020, the McLaren Speedtail was introduced. A hybrid setup with a V8 from the 720S plus an electric motor produced a maximum power of 1,036 horsepower and a mind-blowing 848 pound-feet of torque. Its top speed is estimated at 250 miles an hour or 403 kilometers an hour. 106 units were made at a minimum estimated price of 2.1 million pounds or 2.5 million US dollars. In 2018, the Senna was added to the McLaren Ultimate Series classification, the top category at McLaren, including the F1, P1, and Speedtail. The Senna was a new design and not a successor to either the F1 or P1. It was named after Ayrton Senna, the Brazilian three-time F1 champion and McLaren Formula One team driver. McLaren Automotive has exclusive rights to the Senna name. No other company can use this name. There have been three variants of this model: the Senna GTR, Senna LM, and Senna GTR LM. Finally, in 2021, the McLaren Sabre was designed, being inspired from the McLaren Ultimate Vision Gran Turismo. Only 16 were made, 13 of which went to the US market. It has a twin-turbo V8 producing 824 horsepower with a top speed of 218 miles an hour or 351 kilometers an hour, making it the fastest McLaren with 2 seats. McLaren Automotive has a very bright future if they continue to develop new supercars, hypercars, and expand their product offering. They should offer more engine and powertrain options. An all-electric version, due to weight considerations, may be unfeasible unless lithium-ion battery technology advances to the point that battery volume is reduced enough to not be space or weight prohibitive. Another option may be hydrogen combustion engines, again, if internal hydrogen storage is not space or weight prohibitive. I believe McLaren Automotive should continue to follow their marketing plan of introducing a model and then adding variants. This is very effective from a marketing perspective, since it further elevates the brand and also increases product offerings to consumers and collectors of appreciable assets. Something important to consider is the introduction of one or more SUVs. This is my sketch of what a McLaren SUV could look like. Executed correctly, this market segment could have a large positive financial impact on the company. McLaren could either have larger limited production runs or offer open-ended production for the SUVs and price them in the 150,000 to 250,000 pound sterling range, and in US dollars that's $185,000 to $300,000. This price range would generate significant volume for the manufacturer. Another marketing plan would be to consider a new joint venture with Mercedes. Like the Mercedes-Benz SLR McLaren from 2003 to 2009, the SLR has been immortalized in die-cast models and other commemorative items, a testament to its desirability. A new joint venture with Mercedes-Benz or even BMW, their original engine supplier, would further expand McLaren's target audience. Some future values of McLaren's tend to depreciate by a great deal compared to other supercar brands. For example, a typical 570S will depreciate 25 to 40% in 5 years. The high cost of ownership, as well as below average reliability, all contribute to double-digit depreciation percentages. McLarens that cannot demonstrate meticulous maintenance will depreciate even further, as the cost of ownership will be very high. Thanks for watching the review and analysis of McLaren, a supercar manufacturer which deserves its place as a premier global supercar and hypercar brand. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I have been in creating it. Bruce McLaren, Gordon Murray, and Ron Dennis are all giants in the automotive world, and all McLaren customers and fans have all of them to thank for creating a legendary automotive brand. Drive, your source for automotive reviews, analysis, maintenance, and restorations.